Hi everyone, my name is Karen Robb. I am Assistant Professor of Communication Arts here at Bethel College and Associate Minister for Plymouth Congregational Church in Wichita. There have been many twists and turns leading to the creating of this production. The seeds for the original play No Cross, No Crown, the story of Antoinette Brown Blackwell, were planted on Mother's Day 2002 when I heard Dr. Robert Myers preach a sermon in which he mentioned many historic women. But the one that stood out to me was Antoinette, the first female ordained minister in the United States. I was not yet serving a church at the time. Seminary was not even on my radar, and in fact, I had only been attending church for about 8 months after a 20-year absence. I was so interested in this Antoinette character, though, that the Monday after hearing that sermon, I went to the bookstore and ordered her biography by Elizabeth Casden. While reading the final chapter of the biography, I thought, this would make a great play. At the time, I did not think I had the talent to take on such a task. Fast forward 7 years to 2009, and after a year and a half of seminary education and a lot of encouragement about my writing abilities, I thought once again of writing a play about Antoinette Brown Blackwell. I am grateful to my professor, Sandra Kuntz, for agreeing to oversee the project as an independent study toward my Master of Divinity degree at Phillips Theological Seminary, and University Congregational Church in Wichita for being willing to produce the first production of the play in October of 2010. This summer, when I was hired here at Bethel, I looked at other plays for our fall production, but decided to revisit my own play, No Cross, No Crown, because it involves a number of women who worked in the suffrage movement. And with this being the 100-year anniversary of the ratification of the 19th Amendment, I thought the play would be timely. Also, by doing a play I had written, we would not have issues with copyright if we were unable to perform in front of a live audience and wanted at the last minute to live stream the performance instead. However, when the campus moved to orange status at the beginning of the school year, I realized that we could not safely perform without the actors wearing masks. It would not have made sense for the characters in the play to wear masks, being that the action took place in the 1840s through 1920, and so the original script was completely rethought. Rather than the entire play taking place between the 1840s and 1920, the cast and I reimagined it to take place partly in the present day, so actors could wear their masks. We took out the dialogue between historic characters and kept only the speeches and letters that could be filmed individually, so actors could be filmed without their masks. This new production still focuses on Antoinette Brown Blackwell and her involvement in the women's suffrage movement, but includes more information about some of the other figures she interacted with, some of whom you may recognize and some of whom you've probably never heard of. I am deeply grateful to the Bethel College students who so willingly jumped into this project and who remained flexible and willing to make changes right up to the end. And thanks to Bill Esch and the Women's Choir, Casey Wilson, the Kaufman Museum, Damon Clausen, the library, Brad Bourne for being unable to say no to students when they asked him to participate, Jacob Prickett and our guest stars Yannick Dozier and Enjoy Fountain. And if you are a Bethel student and think what we're doing here looks like something you'd like to be involved in, then I encourage you to come out and audition for our spring semester show. Watch your email for audition notifications in January, and students of all races, ages, genders, and abilities are encouraged to audition. But for now, I hope you enjoy our production of No Cross, No Crown, COVID edition.
There's a wave of indignation rolling round and round the land, and its meaning is so mighty and its mission is so grand, that none but knaves and cowards dare deny its just demand as we go marching on. Men and brothers, dare you do it? Men and brothers, dare you do it? Men and brothers, dare you do it as we go marching on? Ye men who wrong your mothers and your wives and sisters too, how dare you rob companions who are always brave and true? How dare you make them servants who are all the world to you as they go marching on? Men and brothers, dare you do it? Men and brothers, dare you do it? Men dare you do it as we go marching on? Whence came your foolish notion, now so greatly overgrown, that a woman's sober judgment is not equal to your own? Has God ordained that suffrage is a gift to you alone, while life goes marching on? Men and brothers, dare you do it? Men and brothers, dare you do it? Men and brothers, dare you do it as we go marching on?
Come in.
Hey, Jesse.
Oh, hey, Nathan.
How's it going?
Oh, it's going all right. What are you up to?
Oh, just hanging out. What are you up to?
I'm working on that research project for Brad's class.
Oh, yeah, Brad's class. Yeah, that research project that I haven't started yet.
You haven't started your project yet?
I've just been really busy, It's fine. It'll be great. It's fine. It's fine.
Okay, you can make your own decisions, I guess.
What do you listen to?
I'm actually listening to the song, one of the songs that the women's suffrage movement sang in front of the White House during their protests.
Oh, really? That's pretty cool.
Yeah. It's to the tune of the That Hymn of the Republic. Keeps getting stuck in my head.
Oh, yeah, the Star Wars one. Yeah.
No, that's the Imperial March.
Oh, is it?
Yeah.
Oh, I mean, the names are kind of similar, so I don't know.
But it would be a little bit silly if Darth Vader walked out to dun 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 dun.
Yeah, I guess that would kind of throw off his whole groove, so.
That would be funny though.
That
I
would
should
be
edit
pretty
that.
funny.
Anyway, I'm working on this project, and I gotta tell you, you should probably start soon, because
You
I
think
have
so?
been working on this for maybe 2 days off and on, and I have found so much cool stuff.
Oh, nice.
I'm doing Antoinette Brown Blackwell.
Oh, cool.
She's
Never
such
heard of
a
her.
cool person, and
Really?
she had so much cool history in her life.
Okay.
Yeah, she was the first female ordained minister, eventually.
Oh, really?
I haven't gotten to that part yet, but yeah. If you want, I can share my notes with you.
Oh, yeah, sure.
You
Go
can
ahead.
maybe generate some ideas and
Yeah,
stuff like that. At
that'd be
least
awesome.
you'll be doing something akin to the project. You can
Yeah.
count it as work, right? It's brainstorming.
Brainstorming and thinking about the stuff, so that's always
I
good.
have some notes in here. It's in glitter pen. You're welcome.
Oh, glitter pen. Awesome.
Let me see. Okay, so let's start at the very beginning.
That's a good place to start.
Antoinette was born in 1825 in New York, and she was one of 7 children.
One of
she
7
was the
children?
baby of the family, yeah.
That's a lot of siblings.
I mean, I guess it wasn't back then.
Well, I guess that's true, yeah.
So she grew up pretty religious and believed that salvation was not like a one-time thing, but it was more like the beginning of a life of service to God.
Sure, yeah.
I can get on that board, like on that
Yeah,
note. I can do that. When she was 13, she graduated from the district school and went to Monroe County Academy, which is the first secondary school in the county. And then after she graduated from there at age 15, she was asked to teach the younger kids at a different school.
Gotcha, yeah.
Yeah. She did that for a little while. She could have remained a teacher, but it was like, it wasn't her calling, but they kind of asked her to teach just because it was one of the only things that an unmarried woman at the time could do.
Right.
She just wasn't feeling it, so she decided to go to college. So in 1846, she set off on a 300-mile trip from her house in New York to attend Oberlin College in Ohio, which was the only college in the entire country that had courses open for women.
Wow, there were so many astonishing things in that one statement.
Exactly.
That's like
the
crazy.
Only college.
The only college.
Entire in Ohio, of all
Yeah.
places.
A 300-mile trip?
Yes, 300.
That's,
Yeah.
That's a long way.
She had to take a mule-drawn barge, and then a steamer, and then a stagecoach, and
Wow.
crazy trip.
That's a lot of steps.
Yeah, they couldn't exactly just buy a plane ticket.
That's true. They didn't have those yet.
So, on that stagecoach is where she first heard about who would later become one of her best friends,
Oh, really?
Lucy Stone.
Oh, okay.
And I still don't know a whole lot about her, but she
Mhm.
was described as bright but eccentric and It is a little bit too loud about her
really?
for women's rights. And so Antoinette was like, oh, I gotta get to know this girl.
For sure.
Right, so she met her, and when they first met each other, they weren't sure they were gonna like each other.
Oh, really?
But they eventually became as close as sisters, best friends.
Well, that's good.
Yeah. And one funny thing that I found in this book was Antoinette asked Lucy if, she said something like, aren't you a little bit young to be so loud about women's rights and stuff?
Oof.
And Lucy goes, I'm 7 years older than you.
Oh, wow.
And so Antoinette was like, excuse me, sorry.
That's kind of an awkward situation.
It was. But they got along right as rain, and they disagreed on a lot of things, but Antoinette thought that Lucy had some pretty radical views about slavery, and they were always arguing about religion.
Yeah, I mean,
which, was Antoinette's whole thing. That's what she was going to college for, actually.
Yeah, I mean, people argue about religion a lot, so.
Even now. We'll probably always argue about it.
Probably.
Well, I was going to go to the library in a bit and pick up some more books.
Oh, really?
Physical books.
Books, wow.
Yeah.
That beats Wikipedia.
Right. I was going to go get some more books. You can come with me and hang out, or I can help you with your project or something like that.
Yeah, now that you've been talking about it, I should probably start on my project.
You probably should.
Sounds like a good
idea.
idea.
At least pick somebody. We'll work on it.
Yeah, I should probably find, that's a good idea. Oh, yeah. All right,
Make your own notes.
That's it.
Come in.
Hey, Allie, what's up?
Hey, not much. I'm just working on this project for Brad.
Right, the project for Brad. Brad's project.
You haven't started yet, have you?
No, I have not.
I wish I could say I was surprised.
Well, you shouldn't be surprised.
Well, I'm doing this woman named Lucy Stone. She was the first woman in the United States to keep her own last name after she got married.
That's really cool, actually.
I know. And then all the other women that did the same thing after her were called Lucy Stoners.
Stoners. Let me guess. Her birthday was April 20th.
Very mature of you. But no, actually, speaking of birthdays, when she was born and her mother saw that she was a girl, she said, "Oh dear, I'm so sorry it's a girl. A woman's lot is so hard."
Well, I wish I could say she was wrong, but she was probably right about that. Especially way back then, so yeah.
Mm-hmm. Lucy actually had to pay for her own education because her father opposed higher education.
Yeah, well, I have to pay for my own education because my dad is cheap, so, I guess it's sort of the same.
Welcome to student loan debt.
Oh yeah, big time.
Yeah, she was really woke for the time too, which is part of why I picked her.
Mm-hmm.
Like, she left the Congregational Church because they were in favor of slavery and she was an abolitionist.
Well, that's actually really cool, like a stance to take, especially, pre-Civil War.
I know, I'm proud of her.
Yeah.
I was actually about to go to the library and get a couple more books and maybe study with some people. Do you want to come?
Yeah, sure, why not?
Okay, maybe you can get started on your own project.
Nah.
I wonder if you have any idea how dreadfully I feel about your studying that old musty theology, which already had its grave clothes on, and is about to be buried in so deep a grave that no resurrection trumpet could call it into being. And yet my own dear Nettie is spending 3 precious years of her life's young prime, wading through that deep slough, from the strain of which she can never wash herself, and by which, I fear, her vision will be so clouded that she can only see men through creeds. When will you learn that wall of Bible, brimstone, church, and corruption has hitherto buried women into nothingness?
Oh dear, Lucy, I do wish we believed alike. I wished somebody believed as I do, and some people are beginning to believe so, but then we'll agree to disagree, as you used to say so often. I must tell you of the assignment given to Lettice Smith and me in one of our classes. We have been instructed to write essays on the biblical passages that forbid women to preach. Let your women keep silence in the churches, for it is not permitted unto them to speak. And let the women learn in silence with all subjection. I suffer not a woman to teach, nor to usurp authority over the man, but to be in silence. I believe the professor has given us this task in order to put us in our proper place. However, I have taken this as a challenge to justify my position on women preaching. I've been examining what the Bible has to say on the position of women a good deal this winter, reading various commentaries, comparing them with each other and with the Bible, and hunting up every passage in the Scriptures that have any bearing on the subject, either near or remote. My mind grows stronger and firmer on the subject, and a light comes beaming in, full of promise. Lately I have been writing out my thoughts to see if they will all hang together, but I have not finished yet. It's a hard subject, and takes a long time to see through it, doesn't it? But no cross, no crown.
What's up, Nathan?
Oh, hey,
Oh, hi,
Nathaniel, how's
guys.
it going?
Are you guys working on your project?
Yep. What about you?
Yeah, we are.
Nice.
Working
Right
hard.
on the way over here.
Who'd you pick?
I'm doing Antoinette Brown Blackwell.
Oh my gosh, I'm doing Lucy Stone.
We're
Best
best
friends!
friends!
Oh my
You should
God.
read this
So
book
adorable.
after me.
I'll borrow it after.
What about you?
I'm still working on it. I got a short list, so we're narrowing it down here.
We're working on it. What about you?
Oh, I haven't started.
Dude, it's due in a week.
That is so much time. That's like, what, 6 days?
I don't know how you have so much free time.
What part are you at?
I'm actually at the part where they're at college.
Oh, I haven't gotten to that.
It's really interesting. I'm trying not to get heated about it because Oberlin College was pretty progressive for the time that it was in, like to even allow women to be at the college at all, but they also didn't believe in the women's right to speak in public, and so they didn't even allow them to debate in classroom settings.
Oh my goodness.
That's
So
interesting, I guess.
it is interesting.
I feel like the whole point of going to class is to like have
Learn
discussion
stuff, you know?
and debate.
Yeah, that's true. Well, Antoinette and Lucy were public speakers at heart, and so they're like,
Yeah.
well, if Oberlin College won't teach us public speaking, then we'll teach ourselves. So get this, guys. They started a secret club.
Oh my gosh.
That is
Yeah,
so
like a
cool.
for real secret
That
club.
is so
for real
cool.
secret club?
For real, they probably had a secret knock. It was so cool. It
Wow.
was called the Young Ladies Association of Oberlin Collegiate Institute for the Promotion of Literature and Religion.
Wow, that is
That-
a mouthful.
That's
gonna
one
write
heck
that
of a
down.
You
name
can
for a
borrow my
secret
notes to
club.
write that down.
Thank you.
You know, I feel like if they were gonna have a secret club, they would have a shorter name.
Yeah,
Because
you
like
know.
I feel like if you're gonna be secretive about it, you wouldn't want to be saying the name for like 5 minutes.
That's true. They did
Yeah.
shorten it to the Ladies Literary Society.
See, now that's a lot
better.
better.
You know, like
Yeah.
Dumbledore's Army,
Yeah.
you know, very good.
Yeah, yeah.
That's-
Rolls off the tongue a little bit easier. They, they met at someone's, Lucy's pupil's house on the outskirts of town. So they wouldn't get caught.
Sneaky.
Very
Keeping on the
sneaky.
down
Did you
low.
know that these ladies were little hooligans in college? Also, women weren't even allowed to graduate from
You
the college.
kidding?
No, I'm
That's-
not kidding. They were allowed to take all the credits necessary to get a degree, but then they just wouldn't get a degree.
Why not?
Wow.
Why go to college?
Okay,
Yeah,
but like, look at it
exactly.
this way. I want to give you an example. So imagine that a lady goes and she takes all the credits necessary for a biology degree.
Mhm.
If the college were to give her a biology degree, it would be like them saying, "We believe in women biologists."
Mm.
God forbid.
Right. It's like,
A little bit of out there logic, but okay. I follow.
it's not that hard to understand.
Yeah.
It's just, it
was-
was a little bit complicated. I guess they weren't ready for that much
It was
commitment
it was
yet.
different thinking back then.
Oberlin College was the only college in the country that has women at it currently at this time.
Mhm.
So, I mean, just allowing women at all was progressive enough, and
That's
it was
fair.
a privilege to go
Yeah.
as a lady. So, I learned that Antoinette finished college in 1850,
Okay.
but get this, guys. Her name didn't appear in the official listings for the theological class of 1850 until 1908.
What?
That's crazy.
58 years is a long time to wait for a degree.
That
It's
is
like
a
in a
long
whole
time.
different century.
It is, it
That's
is.
crazy.
Probably wait 4 years.
I mean, they were
Jeez.
lucky she was still around at that point.
Yeah.
Did you say 1850?
I did.
Oh, I think that's the year that Lucy was organizing like the first National Women's Rights Convention in Worcester, Massachusetts.
Oh, nice.
Such a nice word,
Yes. That
Didn't
is
she
right.
ask Antoinette to speak at that?
Yeah. I'm remembering now. Yeah. She wanted Antoinette to come, but Antoinette was having financial issues at the time and didn't think that she was going to be able to make it.
Uh-huh.
And so Lucy Stone / the convention itself was like, no, it's okay. We'll pay you to come talk.
Oh.
But then
That's nice.
Antoinette was kind of worried and a little bit skeptical. Like, if they're paying me to talk, then they're probably going to expect me to talk about what you want me to talk about.
That's
And
fair.
Antoinette wanted to talk about religion, which was her whole thing.
Yeah.
So,
Oh, didn't Lucy like encourage her to use that like Oberlin paper that she'd written about like women speaking in the church?
yeah, yep, I remember that too.
That's so cool.
hmm
Yeah, no, this convention was a big deal, you guys. There were like over 1,000 people there, like Pauline Davis, Ernestine Rose, Abby Price, and then Lucy, of course.
1,000 people?
Yes.
1,000 people?
I can't even imagine 1,000
Wow.
people in one place anymore.
Yeah, me neither.
That's crazy.
But Susan B. Anthony was working as a teacher in New York at the time, and she read a transcript of Lucy's script, and that's what inspired her to begin working on the women's suffrage movement.
That's crazy. I thought she was like one of the first people to do that.
I thought she started it.
Yeah.
Well, I guess that's what research projects are for.
Susan B. Anthony didn't start the women's rights movement?
Apparently not. You learn something new every day, I guess.
Hi guys, by the way.
Hey, hi. We're just really into it.
Oh, you're good. Sorry we're late. Practice took forever today.
It's okay.
No worries. Who did you pick, Hayden?
I have not fully decided on who I want yet.
Go ahead, Charlotte.
Bro.
I'm actually doing Ernestine Rose right now.
Oh,
Nice.
I don't know if you guys know anything on her.
I don't.
Okay, well, this is her. She's from Poland. She was a Jewish atheist and actually, like, the first Jewish feminist. And, like, atheism and Judaism seemed really contradictory, but, like, it's more about the culture versus, like, the religion for Judaism. So it's, like,
That's interesting.
yeah, it's kind of weird, but I kind of enjoyed reading on that. But, like, the crazy thing is, hold on, let me find it in this book if I remember. Yeah, so, like, what it says here is, like, she traveled, like, a hard winter to, like, because her dad, when she was 16, was like, hey, you're gonna marry this man. And she goes, no, I'm not going to. So she traveled a hard winter in Poland to go to a court system to get her case appealed. And when she got it appealed, she went back to her dad, and with her inheritance, which was like her mother's land and all her mother's money, gave it back to him, and was like, okay, bye, I'm moving to London. Goes to London and marries a man there.
Straight up power move right there.
Independent woman.
Classic Disney princess.
So, and then when she's in London, they spend a few years there until she eventually migrates to the U.S., where she was like, actually like she was the first women's rights lobbyist in the U.S., and she was like, called a female devil for like arguing with male pastors and priests.
Interesting. I'm surprised I've never heard much about her.
Well, that's because the media was focused on how beautiful she was. See, like
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
Oh,
like
yeah.
the hair and
I love the ringlets.
So beautiful, man.
yeah, that hair.
it's really interesting you say that because I was just reading, I think it was this one in here, that about how like Lucy Stone wore this like, it was like a ridiculous costume for the time is what it was called, but it was basically like really puffy pants under like a huge dress skirt.
Yeah.
And so bloomers, yes, that's
Yeah.
what it was. No, she thought it was a lot healthier for women to wear because it wasn't like a long dress that would drag on the ground, and it wasn't like a corset that would squeeze all of their organs out of place.
That makes
It was
sense.
kind of ugly, but you know, it was a lot healthier. So
But, you know, hashtag free your gut. You gotta save your organs.
Hashtag free the gut.
Hashtag free the gut.
Here's there's a reason why Antoinette didn't like that, not only because it just wasn't her taste, but Antoinette was worried that, you know, she's working really hard and fighting really hard to be recognized as a member of society just as cool and worthy of high vocation as a man. And if she were to start wearing what was seen as a little bit of a ridiculous outfit, then they would pay attention more to what she was wearing than, like, her cause. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
No,
Yeah,
she'd
that
be
makes
associated with the... That's why she told Lucy all the time.
yeah,
It's
Lucy on the other hand was like, "This is part of the fight we're fighting. You know, women should get to choose."
Women should wear whatever they want. Lucy was like, or Antoinette was like, well, I don't want you to wear that.
The media still does that today. Like, they still focus more on, like, how a woman looks versus, like, what her agenda is, and it's absolutely ridiculous.
It's true.
It's a sad reality. Ooh, guys, it is super late. The cafe is about to close.
Oh, crap.
Oh, dang.
Do you guys want to go get dinner?
Yeah,
And then maybe come back?
Yeah, we can come back to
Food.
this. Good
Because
chat.
I'm hungry.
Me too.
This exegesis makes the passage have nothing whatever to do with the question of public teaching. The females were not forbidden to take part in the work of instructing the church, of speaking either by revelation, or by knowledge, or by prophesying, or by doctrine, or of doing anything else which they had the wisdom and ability to do. And moreover, being taught by the Spirit of the mighty God, they did actually take part in these exercises. In what portion of the inspired volume do we find any commandment forbidding women to act as public teacher, provided she has a message worth communicating and will deliver it in a manner worthy of her high vocation? Surely nowhere. This was too sacred a subject to be coldly decided by the voice of law, and so they left it, where it must ever remain, at the portal of the individual conscience of every moral agent. I wish to introduce a resolution. Resolved that the Bible recognizes the rights, duties, and privileges of woman as a public teacher, as every way equal with those of man, that it enjoins upon her no subjection that is not enjoined upon him, and that it truly and practically recognizes neither male nor female in Christ Jesus. God created the first human pair equal in rights, possessions, and authority. He bequeathed the earth to them as a joint inheritance, gave them joint dominion over the irrational creation, but none over each other. They sinned. God announced to them the results of that sin. One of these results was the rule which man would exercise over women. But this rule was no more approved, endorsed, or sanctioned by God than was the twin-born prophecy, "Thou shalt bruise his heel." God could not from his nature command Satan to injure Christ, nor any other of the seed of woman. What particle of evidence is there, then, for supposing that in the parallel announcement he commanded man to rule over woman? Both passages should have been translated will instead of shall.
For my part, I see no need to appeal to any written authority. We need no written authority from Moses or Paul, particularly when it is so obscure and indefinite as to admit of different interpretations. When the inhabitants of Boston converted the harbor into teapot rather than submit to unjust taxes, they did not go to the Bible for their authority, for if they had, they would have been told from the same authority to give unto Caesar what belonged to Caesar. Had the people, when they rose in the might of the right to throw off the British yoke, appealed to the Bible for authority, it would have answered them, "Submit to the powers that be, for they are from God." No, on human rights and freedom, on a subject that is as self-evident as that 2 and 2 make 4, there is no need of any written authority. But this is not what that I intend to speak upon. I wish to introduce resolution and leave it to the action of the convention. Resolved, that we do not ask for our rights as gift of charity, but as act of justice, for it is in accordance with the principles of republicanism that as woman has to pay taxes to maintain government, she has a right to participate in the formation and administration of it. That as she is amenable to the laws of her country, she is entitled to a voice in their enactment, and to all the protective advantages they can bestow. And as she is as liable as man to all the vicissitudes of life, she ought to enjoy the same social rights and privileges, and any difference, therefore, in political, civil, and social rights on account of sex is in direct violation of justice and humanity, and as such ought to be held up in the contempt and derision of every lover of human freedom.
Well, children, but there is so much racket over there, it must be something off kilter. I think that twixt the niggers of the South and the women of the North all talking about rights, the white man gonna be in a fix pretty soon. But what's all this here talking about? That man over there say that woman needs to be helped into carriages and lifted over ditches and to have the best places ever. Nobody ever helps me over into carriages and over mud puddles or gives me any place. And ain't I a woman? Look at me. Look at me. I have plowed and planted and gathered into barns, and no man could ever heed me. And ain't I a woman? All right, hold on. Cut. That version was written by Frances Gage 12 years after Sojourner delivered her speech. Ain't I a Woman is not accurate. There's a version that was written down in the Anti-Slavery Bugle 1 month after she delivered the speech. That might be more accurate, but that's through the lens of a white man. Unfortunately, we don't have our own words because she couldn't read or write. So I'm going to try to do it justice and do it more how we think she would. May I say a few words? I want to say a few words about this matter. I am a woman's rights. I have as much muscle as any man and can do as much work as any man. I have plowed, and reaped and husked and chopped and mowed and can do any more than any man can. I have heard much about the sexes being equal. I can carry as much as any man and can eat as much too if I can get it. I am as strong as any man that is now. As for intellect, all I can say is if women have a pint and a man a quart, why can't she have her little pint full? You not need be afraid to give us our rights for fear we will take too much. For we can't take more than our pint will hold. The poor men seem to be all in confusion and don't know what to do. Why, children, if you have enough women's rights, give it to her and you will feel better. You will have your own rights and they won't be so much trouble. I can't read, but I can hear. I have heard the Bible and heard that Eve caused man to sin. Well, if women upset the world, do give her a chance to set it right side up again. The lady has spoken about Jesus, how he never spurned women from him, and she was right. When Lazarus died, Mary and Martha came to him with faith and love and besought him to raise their brother. And Jesus wept, and Lazarus came forth. And how came Jesus into the world? Through God who created him and woman who bore him. Man, where is your part? But the women are coming up. Blessed be God. And a few of the men are coming up with them. But man is in the tight place. The poor slave is on him. Woman is on him. And he is surely between a hock and a buzzard.
Woman must take her rights as far as she can get them. She must lobby her state legislatures for marital property rights, and she must work for women's suffrage. We want to be more than the appendages of society. We want that woman should be the co-equal and helpmeet of man in all of the interests and enjoyments and perils of human life. We want that she should attain to the development of her womanhood and nature. And we want that when she dies, it may not be written on her gravestone that she was the relict of somebody.
Hey, welcome all. Good to see you. Thanks for joining yet another Zoom. Wanted to check in with you about your projects, right? At this point, I think all of you have chosen a historical figure from the women's suffrage movement. I think you also should be at the point where you're starting to explore relationships between the women and the men you have chosen. So that's what we're talking about tonight. Who should start? Jesse, I think when we talked the other night, it sounded like you had a good start on Antoinette Blackwell Brown, right? So how about if you jump in?
Yeah, so I mentioned to you the other day and some of the others in the class we were studying together that she really wanted to be a minister and was involved in the first National Women's Suffrage Convention. But what I haven't told you is that 3 years after the convention, Antoinette finally got her first job as a preacher of sorts in a small church in South Butler, New York. I think part of the reason they were willing to call a woman minister was because they were only able to pay her about $300 a year. But it was still a huge accomplishment that a woman was even considered for the job of a minister, preaching, administering the sacraments, all the preacherly stuff. But there was still a lot of controversy about officially ordaining her.
Wait a minute.
Even though she was already doing all the work.
You said that, she only got paid $300 a year? That's crazy. I just did, the calculations with inflation rates and stuff. That's only, $10,000. That's not even a livable wage.
Yeah, that's poverty wages. So some of the members of the church decided that they couldn't make up their minds, and so they wanted this guy, Garrett Smith, to come in and talk to them so that they would feel better about ordaining her or making a decision on it.
Oh, hey, Garrett Smith's the guy that I picked. He was involved in the abolitionist movement, and he was a financial supporter of John Brown. In fact, he was one of Brown's co-conspirators, known as the Secret Six, and was implicated in the raid on Harper's Ferry. Although he denied knowing any of the specifics of Brown's plans, at one point he gave away 40 acres of land in the Adirondacks in New York State to 3,000 poor African Americans. Frederick Douglass was a good friend of his. Oh, and Smith was a congressman and ran for president in 1848, 1856, and 1860. Oh, and he advocated for women's dress reform, most likely because of his daughter Elizabeth Smith Miller's development of a costume created by Amelia Bloomer. You know, Allie, that Bloomer outfit that Lucy Stone always wore? Oh, and he was Elizabeth Cady Stanton's first cousin.
Wait a minute. I thought you said you hadn't started your project yet.
I was just messing with you.
Ugh.
And I didn't know Elizabeth Cady Stanton was related to Garrett Smith.
Well, now you do.
So at first, this guy, Garrett, that apparently Nathaniel chose, didn't see why Antoinette needed to even be ordained if she was already doing all the work of being a preacher. Like, what's the point? But she tried to convince them that something needed to be done to show the world that they believed in a woman as a minister, and something that would stand without question as a legal ordination in the eyes of law and public opinion, and that it would do them good and her good and good to the whole cause of women in general.
Yeah, and so Garrett Smith took a break from his duties as congressman and spoke at her ordination.
Typically, other members of the other clergy from the county association would participate in the ordination ceremonies, but none of the local congregational clergy would take a public stand in support of a woman minister. Antoinette's liberal clergy friends, such as Samuel May and William Henry Channing, supported her, but they were afraid that their attendance would call into question her commitment to the Orthodox Congregational Church because they were Unitarians. So she finally, she got.
Oh, wait, no, I got this. No, she finally got a liberal Methodist minister from Syracuse, the Reverend Luther Lee, to reluctantly agreed to come. Now, I knew this because I chose Luther Lee as my person, and I only haven't found out much about him except finding a copy of a speech that he gave at Antoinette Brown's ordination. Without even assuming to discuss on this occasion the question of civil and political rights, the text implies sustains me in affirming that in a Christian community united upon Christian principles for Christian purposes, or in other words, in the church of which Christ is the only head, males and females possesses equal rights and privileges. There's no difference. I cannot see how the text can be explained so as to exclude females from any right, office, work, privilege, or immunity which males enjoy, hold, or perform. I do not believe that in any special or specific ordination is necessary to constitute a gospel minister. We are not here to make a minister. It is not to confer on this our sister the right to preach the gospel. If she has not that right already, we have no power to communicate it to her, nor if we have meant to qualify her work in the ministry. If God and mental and moral culture have not already qualified her, we cannot by anything we may do by our way of ordaining or setting her apart. All we are here to do, and all we expect to do, is in due form and by a solemn and oppressive service to subscribe our sister to in testimony to the fact that in our belief, our sister in Christ, Antoinette L. Brown, is one of the ministers of the new covenant, authorized, qualified, and called of God to preach the gospel of his son, Jesus Christ. But looks like he's got an autobiography I could order, but I've also thought about doing my project on Anne Jemima Albach.
Aunt Jemima?
Not Aunt Jemima, Anne Jemima. Anne Jemima Albach. She attended Union Theological Seminary and was the first woman ordained by Mennonite Church, but that was in 1911. I read that there wasn't any other Mennonite woman ordained until 1973.
Wait, hold on, 1973? That's crazy. I would have expected better out of the Mennonites.
The crazy thing was that after all that work to get recognition as a minister, almost immediately after being ordained, like less than a year, she began having serious doubts about like original sin and the divine authority of the Bible and whether or not she really even believed in God. So there were two circumstances that occurred that caused her to step down from her position a little less than a year after her official ordination. There was this one guy who wanted her to deliver a eulogy that basically claimed that the child's death was retribution for his mother's sins.
because she was unmarried, which is something that Antoinette didn't believe in. And then another lady wanted her to talk to her dying son and basically scare him into conversion before he died. And I don't know, these things just really didn't sit very well with Antoinette. So she left her teaching job, her preaching job, and then she went home for the summer because she was just like really confused. She was actually sick during that time too. She felt like she couldn't talk to anybody because her family was still very Orthodox, and even Lucy, like her best friend, like always thought that her religious beliefs were a little foolish, so she couldn't talk to her either. She talked to William Henry Channing, hoping that he would suggest an alternative set of religious beliefs that she could hang on to, but he basically told her, you gotta figure this stuff out for yourself. So she stayed home with her family all summer, and then by fall she figured she was ready to get back into the game. And so she's quoted as saying, "For me it was gradual. Little by little there seemed to arise a bit of firm ground here and there. The belief in practical service, in justice, and a few moral principles, but mostly a belief in the law of love." So when she came back, she had a little bit of a different view on the world and religion and all that stuff. So she was ready to go back to lecturing and preaching and working in the women's rights movement, of course. And so she did that for a little while, but she still felt the call to preach, and so she contacted her friend Horace Greeley, the editor of the New York Tribune.
I can never preach to a regular established church again, let them be ever so reformatory, for I cannot breathe there freely. And, of course, I can never again be the pastor of a church, but must be a preacher for the people. My present religion is a free one. All its truths are revelations from nature's God unto the soul, and one must be outside of all sectarian pressure to speak it freely. This can be better done in the city than in the country, in New York than in any smaller place. I am hoping you might help me launch an experiment where we hire a hall and I preach every Sunday.
So she was hired to write articles for the Tribune and preach every Sunday.
Isn't that about the time that she married one of the Blackwell brothers? Get this, you guys. She and Lucy married brothers, Sam and Henry Blackwell. Isn't that so cute? Like best friend goals?
Yeah, actually, I'm doing Susan B. Anthony, and she was actually one of the only women in the suffrage movement who didn't get married and have kids.
Actually, even though Ernestine ended up getting married, she'd never had kids, so it's crazy that most of the women of the movement did have kids.
Yeah, one year the entire women's suffrage convention was canceled because so many women were too busy with childbearing.
Now, Nettie, not another baby is my peremptory command. 2 will solve the problem whether a woman can be anything more than a wife and a mother, better than half a dozen or 10 even. I don't really want to be a downright scolder, but I can't help looking after the married sheep of the flock a wee bit. I'm sure it is folly for any human being to follow too many professions at the same time. I'm glad you're getting on so finely. Mrs. Stanton sends love and says, if you're going to have a large family of children, go right on and finish up at once, as she has done. She has only devoted 18 years out of the very heart of existence here to the great work. But I say stop now, once and for all. Your life work will be arduous enough with 2.
Susan, would you leave poor Antoinette alone? Just because you want to remain single and without children doesn't mean the rest of us do.
Elizabeth, those of you who have the talent to do such good for the cause have all given yourselves over to baby-making and left poor brainless me to do battle alone. It is a shame, such as the body as I might be spared to rock cradles, but it is a crime for you and Lucy Stone and Antoinette Brown to be doing it.
Dear Antoinette, I was so happy to hear that you had another daughter. In spite of all Susan's admonitions, I do hope you and Lucy will have all the children you desire. I would not have one less than 7, in spite of all the abuse that has been heaped upon me for such extravagance.
So then the Civil War broke out and the women's rights movement was put on hold. When the war was finally over, they were ready to take up the fight for women's rights once again. The Equal Rights Association was established in 1866 and it immediately began working for the right for all people to vote. The group figured that if women and blacks could attain the right to vote, then they'd be able to obtain other rights through legislation. Then the 14th and the 15th Amendments were written to enfranchise Black men, but not women. Many people lobbied for women's rights to be included in those amendments. They're ratified without those inclusions. So in 1869, there was a meeting of the Equal Rights Association over the issue.
Hey, I actually read about that meeting. The person I picked, Stephen Foster, actually spoke out against Elizabeth Cady Stanton and Susan B. Anthony at that meeting.
Ladies and gentlemen, I admire our talented president, Mrs. Stanton, with all of my heart and love the woman. But I believe she has publicly repudiated the principles of the society.
I would like Mr. Foster to state in what way.
These ladies stand at the head of a paper which is adopted as its motto, educated suffrage. I put myself here on this platform as an enemy of educated suffrage, as an enemy of white suffrage, as an enemy of man suffrage, as an enemy of every single kind of suffrage except universal suffrage. Their paper, The Revolution, lately had an article headed, That Infamous 15th Amendment. It is true it was not written by our president, Mrs. Stanton, yet it comes from a person whom she has over and over again publicly endorsed. If you choose to put officers here that ridicule the Negro and pronounce that amendment as infamous, why, I must retire. I cannot work with you. You cannot have my support, and you must not use my name. I cannot shoulder the responsibility of electing officers that publicly repudiate the principles of the society.
There is no name greater than that of Elizabeth Cady Stanton in the matter of women's rights and civil rights. But my sentiments are tinged a little against the revolution. I must say, I cannot see how anyone can pretend that there is the same urgency in giving the ballot to women as to the Negro. With us, the matter is a question of life and death, at least in 15 states of the Union. When women, because they are women, are chased down through the streets of New York and New Orleans, when they are dragged from their houses and hung upon lampposts, when their children are torn from their arms and their brains dashed out upon the pavement, when they are the object of insult and outrage at every turn, when they are in danger of having their houses burnt down over their heads, when their children are not allowed to enter schools, then they will have an urgency to obtain the ballot equal to our own.
Is that not all true about Black women?
Yes. Yes. Yes, it is true of the Black woman, but not because she is a woman, but because she is Black. Julia Ward Howe, in the conclusion of her great speech delivered at the convention in Boston last year, said, "I am willing that the Negro will get the ballot before me." Woman, why, she has 10,000 modes of grappling with her difficulties. I believe that all of the virtues in the world can take care of all the evil. I believe that all of the intelligence in the world can take care of all the ignorance. I am in favor of women's suffrage in order that we will have all of the virtue and vice confronted. Let me tell you that when there were few houses in which a Black man could have put his head, this woolly head of mine found a refuge in the house of Mrs. Elizabeth Cady Stanton. And if I were blacker than 16 midnights without a single star, it would have been the same.
The old anti-slavery school says women must stand back and wait until the Negroes shall be recognized. But we say, if you will not give the whole loaf of suffrage to the entire people, give it to the most intelligent first. If intelligence, justice, and morality are to have precedence in the government, let the question of women be brought up first and that of the Negro last. While I was canvassing the state with petitions and had them filled with names for our cause to the legislature, a man dared to say to me that the freedom of women was all a theory and not a practical thing. When Mr. Douglas mentioned the Black man first and the women last, if he had noticed, he would have seen that it was the men that clapped, and not the women. There is not the woman born who desires to eat the bread of dependence, no matter whether it be from the hand of the father, husband, or brother. For anyone who does so eat her bread places herself in the power of the person from whom she takes it. Mr. Douglas talked about the wrongs of the Negro, but with all the outrages that he today suffers, he would not exchange his sex and take the place of Elizabeth Cady Stanton.
I want to know if granting you the right of suffrage will change the nature of our sexes.
It will change the pecuniary position of women. It will place her where she can earn her own bread. She will not then be driven to such employments only as man chooses for her.
Mrs. Stanton will, of course, advocate for the precedence of her sex, and Mr. Douglas will strive for the first position of his, and both are perhaps right. If it be true that the government derives its authority from the consent of the governed, we are safe in trusting that principle to the uttermost. If one has a right to say that you cannot read and therefore cannot vote, then it may be said that you are a woman and therefore cannot vote. We are lost if we turn away from the middle principle and argue for one class. I was once a teacher among fugitive slaves. There was one old man, and every tooth was gone, his hair was white, and his face full of wrinkles. Yet, day after day and hour after hour, he came up to the schoolhouse and tried with patience to learn to read. And by, when he had spelled out the first few verses of the first chapter of the Gospel of St. John, he said to me, "Now I want to learn to write." I tried to make him satisfied with what he had acquired, but the old man said, "Mrs. Stone, somewhere in the wide world I have a son. I have not heard from him in 20 years, and if I should hear from him, I want to write to him. So take hold of my hand and teach me." I did, but before he had proceeded in many lessons, the angels came and gathered him up and bore him to our Father. Let no man speak of an educated suffrage. The gentleman who addressed you claimed that the Negroes had the first right to suffrage and drew a picture which only his great word power can do. He again in Massachusetts, when it had cast a majority in favor of granted Negro suffrage, stood upon the platform and said that women had better wait for the Negro, that both could not be carried, and that the Negro had better be the one. But I freely forgave him because he felt as he spoke. But woman's suffrage is more imperative than his own, and I want to remind the audience that what he says the Ku Kluxes did all over the South, the Ku Kluxes here in the North, in the shape of man, take away the children from the mother and separate them as completely as if done on the block of the auctioneer. Over in New Jersey, they have a law which says any father, he might be the most brutal man that ever existed, any father, it says, may by his last will and testament dispose of the custody of his child, born or to be born, and that such disposition shall be good against all persons, and that the mother may not recover her child, and that law, modified in form, exists over every state in the Union except for Kansas. Women have an ocean of wrongs too deep for any plummet, and the Negro, too, has an ocean of wrongs that cannot be fathomed. There are two great oceans. In one is the black man, and in the other is the woman. But I thank God for that amendment, and I hope that it will be adopted in every state. I will be thankful in my soul if anybody can get out of that terrible pit. But I believe that the safety of the government would be more promoted by the admission of a woman as an element of restoration and harmony than the Negro. I believe that the influence of woman will save the country before any other power. I see the signs of the times pointing to this consummation, and I believe that in some parts of this country, women will vote for the President of these United States in 1872.
This society calls itself Equal Rights Association. That I understand to be an association which has no distinction of sex, class, or color. Congress does not seem to understand the meaning of the term universal. I understand the word universal to include all. Congress understands that universal suffrage meant the white man only. Since the war, we have changed the name for impartial suffrage. When some of our editors, such as Mr. Greeley and others, were asked what they meant by impartial suffrage, they said, "Why man, of course, the man and the brother." Congress has enacted resolutions for the suffrage of men and brothers. They do not speak of women and sisters. They have begun to change the tactics and call it manhood suffrage. I propose to call it women's suffrage. Then we shall know what we mean. I go for the change of the name. I will not be construed into man and brother. I ask the same rights for women of happiness, and every pursuit in life must be as free, red, and open to me as any man in the land. But they will never be thrown open to me or any of you until we have the power of the ballot in our own hands. That little paper is a great talisman. We have often been told that the golden key can unlock all the doors. That little piece of paper can unlock doors where golden keys fail. Wherever men are, wherever in the workshop, in the store, in the laboratory, or in the legislative halls, I want to see women. Wherever man is, there she is needed. Wherever man has work to do, work for the benefit of humanity, there should be men and women unite and cooperate together. It is not well for man to be alone or work alone, and he cannot work for women as well as women can work for herself. I suggest that the name of this society be changed from Equal Rights Association to Women's Suffrage Association.
I must oppose this till the colored man gains the right to vote. If we change the name of the association for such a reason as it is evidence it was proposed, we will lose the confidence of the public. I hope you will not do it.
Actually, as a result of that meeting, there was a split of the groups, and so there were two groups after the meeting. There was the National Women's Suffrage Association, headed by Elizabeth and Susan, and then there was the American Women's Suffrage Association, headed by Lucy and Julia Ward Howe.
Antoinette's views were a little bit more in line with the AWSA, but she remained friends with Susan and Elizabeth and never joined either group.
Yeah, you know, when I picked Susan B. Anthony, I just never really realized that she was, well, I mean,
A racist?
yeah, a racist. You know, it's hard to learn about somebody you've looked up to and realize that they're not as perfect as you thought they were. I guess you do have to look at these people like their historical context, but it is hard to read some of the stuff that she said in support of educated suffrage. At the same time, she did so much for the movement. She even went so far as to try to vote in the 1872 presidential election. She decided she didn't need an amendment in the Constitution in order to vote, and that the preamble already gave her that right. She tried to vote and she was arrested.
Friends and fellow citizens, I stand before you tonight under the indictment for the alleged crime of having voted at the last presidential election without having a lawful right to vote. It will be my work this evening to prove to you that in thus voting, I not only committed no crime, but instead simply exercised my citizens' rights, guaranteed to me and all United States citizens by the national Constitution, beyond the power of any state to deny. The preamble of the federal Constitution says, "We the people of the United States, in order to form a more perfect union, establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense, promote the general welfare, and secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity, do ordain and establish this Constitution for the United States of America." It was we, the people, not we, the white male citizens, nor yet we, the male citizens, but we, the whole people, who formed the Union. And we formed it, not to give the blessings of liberty, but to secure them, not to the half of ourselves and the half of our posterity, but to the whole people, women as well as men. And it is a downright mockery to talk to women of their enjoyment of the blessings of liberty while they are denied the use of the only means of securing them provided by this democratic Republican government, the ballot. For any state to make sex a qualification that must ever result in the disfranchisement of one entire half of the people is to pass a bill of attainder or an ex post facto law, and is therefore a violation of the supreme law of the land. By the blessings of liberty are forever withheld from women and their female posterity. Webster, Worcester, and Bouvier all define a citizen to be a person in the United States entitled to vote and hold office. The only question left to be settled now is, are women persons? And they hardly believe any of our opponents will have the hardihood to say they are not. Being persons, then, women are citizens, and no state has a right to make any law or to enforce any old law that shall abridge their privileges or immunities. Hence every discrimination against women in Constitution and laws of several states is today null and void, precisely as is every one against Negroes.
Yeah, well, by the 1800s, most of the people working in the women's suffrage movement had grown up after the Civil War had happened, so they didn't have a lot of ties to the split that had happened back in 1869. Neither group the AWSA or the NWSA was making a lot of headway by themselves, so they decided to reconcile their differences and work together towards suffrage. And Elizabeth Cady Stanton, who is my person, tried to reach out to Lucy Stone and go for reconciliation there, but Lucy Stone wasn't ready to come back to that conversation.
I wish you could come and bring Lucy Stone, that we might have one pleasant reunion before we pass to the next sphere, or rest, or action.
As to meeting with Mrs. Stanton, it is out of the question with me. She sent a letter to Mr. Shattuck in which she said I was the biggest liar and hypocrite she had ever seen. After that, you will see that I cannot, with any self-respect, meet her with a pretense of good fellowship. I am too busy with the work that remains to take time to mend broken cisterns.
Even though Lucy wasn't for it, the two groups did finally come together in 1890 to form the National American Women's Suffrage Association. But Lucy Stone died 3 years later, in 1893.
Ernestine died the year before that in 1892.
And Elizabeth Cady Stanton died in 1902.
Susan B. Anthony died in 1906.
By the time that the 19th Amendment was passed in 1919 and ratified by 1920, Antoinette was the only one left from the old guard. She was the last of them to pass away, but a new group of women had taken over the movement, headed by Alice Paul, who had led those protests in front of the White House that we learned about. President Wilson thought that the protesters would just get tired and go away, but then they stayed, and then they were arrested, and then when they were in jail, they went on hunger strikes, and then when word got out that they were being force-fed in prison, President Wilson decided that wasn't a good look, so he decided to publicly support women's rights. Good for him. Who would have guessed? So this is my favorite part of Antoinette's story that I've learned so far, and that is the day of the 1920 election. Antoinette Brown was 95 years old at the time, and her family was afraid that the lines at the voting booth would be too long for her to stand there for so long. I mean, she's a 95-year-old lady. So they borrowed a stool from a neighbor so she would be able to sit while she was in line. But she didn't even end up needing it, because she shows up to the voting booths and everyone there recognizes her and all the work that she's done. And so they just parted and she just got to walk right up and vote. Mm. I mean, isn't that cool? That's such a cool ending to the story.
Say, Lily, you've been quiet. Do you have a report? How's your project coming along?
I mean, it's coming along great. It's just that I feel like the person I chose doesn't really have a lot of connection to the people that everyone else talked about, at least that I'm aware of. And I've been examining issues that haven't really been addressed by anyone, except for a little bit whenever we talked about the 1869 Equal Rights Association meeting. And I mean, I appreciate that it's the 100-year anniversary of the ratification of the 19th Amendment and all that, but I think that's something that at the same time, we should acknowledge that it's really not an end to the struggle, particularly for women of color. I chose an Indigenous suffragist and a citizen of the Yankton Sioux tribe, Gertrude Simmons Bonnet, and also known as Zekalasa. And I read in the New York Times article that said that when the 19th Amendment was ratified, that she told members of the Alice Paul's Women's Party that while the Indian woman rejoices with you, the fight is far from over. And because at the time, so many Native women still lacked the right to vote because they were not considered U.S. citizens, but that was the legal words of the government. In 1924, Congress then passed the Snyder Act, which gave gave all the Native people citizenship on their own land. But then the response by the states was Jim Crow kind of stuff, where they enacted policies, all these different things that kept us from voting. In some states, Indigenous peoples weren't guaranteed the right to vote until 1965, whenever we got the Voting Rights Act. So not just that, it was that we weren't citizens, and then it was, all these other things that we couldn't do. And it wasn't just Indigenous women who were discriminated against, but all women of color. And before the 19th Amendment, Ellison Smith, a South Carolina senator, called the Negro race alien and unfit, and said that it was a crime against white civilization to have granted Black men the right to vote, and that extending the vote to Black women would unleash new evils, whatever that means. So when some white suffragists encountered by saying that there were more white women than Black women voting, so white supremacy wouldn't be endangered. That's literally what they said to protect, ridiculous. And then Carrie Chapman wrote a letter to the North Carolina congressman saying that the present condition of the South makes sovereigners of some Negro men, while all white women are their subjects. These are sad but solemn truths. If you want white supremacy, why not have it constitutionally honorably? And the federal amendment offers, we're on the way. In addition to that women of color were voting, we talked about the Jim Crow stuff, they kept poll taxes, literacy tests, grandfather clauses, and threats of violence if they tried to vote. Asian American immigrants were also excluded from this, and they were ineligible because of their naturalized citizenship, because of their race, and didn't even get to vote until 1943. And we still see voter suppression today. And so while this Native American woman celebrates the anniversary of the ratification, it's really not, we're not done fighting yet. I would like to say that, but we're not done at all.
Thanks, Lily. And hey, thank you all. Sounds like you're making great progress. I will follow up by email if we need to do more, but that's good for tonight. All right. Peace.
Shout, shout, up with your song. Cry with the wing, for the dawn is breaking. March, march, sing you along. White blows our banner and hope is waking. Song with its story, dreams with their glory. Low they call, and glad is their word. Loud and louder it swells, thunder of freedom, the voice of the Lord. Long, long, we in the past, cowered in dread from the light of heaven. Strong, strong, stand we at last, fearless in faith and with sight new given. Strength with its beauty, life with its duty. Hear the voice, oh hear and obey. These beckon us on. Open your eyes to the blaze of day. Comrades, ye who have dared, first in the battle to strive and sorrow, scorned, scorned, not have ye cared, raising your eyes to a wider morrow, ways that are weary, days that are dreary, toil and pain, by faith ye have borne. Hail, hail, victors ye stand, wearing the wreath that the brave have worn. Life strife leads to our one, not can ye win, but by faith and daring. On, that ye have done, but for the work of today preparing. Firm in reliance, laugh in defiance, laugh in hope, for sure is the end. March, march, many as one, shoulder to shoulder and friend to friend. Be strong and courageous, whate'er may befall. We know our Redeemer will answer our call. Though sorrow and trials are weighing us down, yet hope looks away from the cross to the crown. From the cross to the crown, let us follow our Lord. From the cross to the crown, let us cling to his word. Though sorrow and trials are weighing us down, yet faith leads us on from the cross to the crown. His cup of affliction ocean was filled to the brim. And are we not willing to suffer for him? The robe of his glory for us he laid down, to show us the path from the cross to the crown. From the cross to the crown, let us follow our Lord. From the cross to the crown, let us cling to his word. Though sorrow